Welcome to the Building and Growing podcast. We're delighted to have Luke Mackey from Kota with us today. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're most welcome. So, Luke, we've known each other for a couple of years now. Basically, from when you started founding what was at the time Yonder, and it's now Kota. But tell us a bit about yourself, and feel free to start from all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, no problem, Lucas. So this is the second company I started. So I think you've been on a bit of a journey yourself. You understand how tumultuous it can be at times.
Indeed.
So I started a company out of college when I could have gone and joined another company and kind of gone on the career path, but I, for some reason, took that risk, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I don't know, but this seems a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
And that I did that for 4 years. That was in consumer. That was basically an app that allows you to order ahead from restaurants and pick up your coffee and your lunch when you arrive.
Nice.
Very much saw that idea from the States and what was going on in the US with Starbucks. And I said, this is going to happen with your independent QSR. So did that for 4 years. Very good kind of first 2 years of the business. Very interesting last 2 years. Learned a lot as a first-time founder. And then I stepped away, and under some interesting circumstances, which we can go into a little bit later if you like. And I then joined a multinational. So I joined Bolt, the ride-hailing guys.
Nice.
And I was the GM for them in Ireland. I was the employee number one in Ireland, and I launched them right in the middle of COVID.
Nice.
Again, very interesting time to launch a business. Very chaotic, because basically you weren't allowed to market to customers because launching a mobility app in the middle of different stages of lockdowns has its difficulties.
Indeed.
So did that for the guts of 2 years. Really enjoyed that, and that was kind of the first time I actually worked for someone outside of kind of college jobs.
Okay.
And I wanted to do that, and then I kind of got the itch to start something up again. And through that kind of experience, while setting up ops and setting up, I suppose, all the local entities and the I suppose payroll and the things that you were expected to have in a country, including benefits, I just saw how poor that experience was. And
Indeed.
That's where it led us to Kota. So very quickly, Kota is a platform and an app for employers and employees. It makes it really easy to set up international core benefits like health insurance, pensions, life insurance, and do it in a very different way to how traditionally it's done.
Yeah.
And traditionally it's done kind of paper and pen. It's done very siloed and fragmented, not even internationally, but even locally. Or you either have to go through a broker or go through the insurers or provider themselves. We completely centralize everything. We integrate with the number of providers, make everything instant, make everything really delightful for the employer and the employee.
Yeah.
Interoperable with their existing tools just doesn't exist in benefits. And and just make it really easy for smaller companies, kind of the underserved companies and the employees to access these products that are really important, but for some reason expensive and not super accessible.
Fantastic. That's great. And look, I must admit, my favorite part of your journey is the fact that you spotted the problem on the ground and then you launched a company to solve it, because there were a lot of founders before that came up with ideas that didn't necessarily solve a problem, therefore they kind of didn't get the traction in a difficult economic time like now, whereas you did.
Yeah, if I look back at it, I sat on that idea for a very long time. I think it's really good to be really insecure about your ideas, and this is definitely a domain I didn't know a lot about. So I sat on the idea for a pretty long time. I think the first thing that I do anytime I have something that I'm interested in is just jump into Figma and design because I had a problem, and the first thing I wanted to do was, what does the solution look like? Bearing in mind we were in the middle of COVID, where you had a load of free time on your hands, so I'd be sitting in front of the TV at night just jumping into Figma, and I had all these different files of ideas, and one of them was this. And it was essentially, how do I build something for this poor experience I had? What was the perfect experience look like as an employer and employee? And I finally kind of whipped something up that I liked, and I was kind of playing around with it and made it available on my phone. And for the course of a year, all I do is ask people, particularly people who are either founders or you were involved in that buying process or involved in even that enrolling process, like friends who were just actually getting access to these products in companies. And I'd show them the video of what it would potentially look like if we had this user experience. And I just use that as a feedback loop. I just get people's opinions, what they like to see, how that enrollment flow would look like. I was trying to see what other products, say in the US, were doing interestingly. So I was trying to solve my own problem. And then I was putting it in front of the people who actually have this problem on a day to day, whether it was the finance or HR or founders who are expanding. And that's really where I saw the friction grow more. I was speaking to friends who are founders, and I was asking, hey, what did you guys do when it came to benefits? Because I just after having this pretty kind of interesting experience. And they were like, oh, we did this here with a broker, and then we did it here. It's not super great, but the real pain came when we hired our first person in Spain, or like we didn't know how to do it in Spain. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like that's really changed how the market is, the dynamic has shifted, because previously I wouldn't have to think about that one person I hired in Spain. Like, remote changed it all, so the pain became larger, and we see that now as a company. We see like the more people you have and the more countries you're in, the more of a pain it becomes.
The more complex it is.
So that was how we found the problem, and that's kind of just continue to see. Like the solution in itself is a very, very difficult solution, because it is becoming regulated, it's becoming international, it's building a product obviously people really want to use. It's solving the kind of value chain issues that are there, where there's all these people in the middle and we have to kind of remove them. But yeah, when we get that right, we've kind of got a very, very strong, at least, problem solution fit.
Fantastic. And tell us about the founding team.
Yeah, so actually, interestingly, all the founders had the same problem in their own kind of way. So obviously I mentioned my experience as a GM trying to set up for my small team. I had two other co-founders, Patrick and Deepak. Patrick was consulting for companies throughout COVID. So he was just like working with companies who are doing things in payments and fintech. And he was basically just like, okay, at a point in time, we need to start thinking of getting access to like a pension and maybe contributing to my own health insurance. And he had to go through that process. He went to a broker, he got sent back the file to fill out, or the PDF to fill out. And ultimately, I think I asked him, like, I spoke to him at the start of the journey, and I spoke to him a few months later, trying to expect him at the end of the journey. And he was like, oh, they didn't get you that. I think I just got lost in paper, never got to it. And that was kind of funny. And then Deepak was working in a company that grew from, I think, like less than 100 or less than like 60 people to a company of 300 or 400 people. Throughout a period of like 18 months. And this was just like that COVID ramp up. And they went from like being in 3 countries to being in like 7 countries, and they didn't have any benefits. So here he was in kind of the leadership side of engineering, trying to hire these senior people. And he would be hiring people in their 40s with family, and like coming from really big companies where they expect these things, and they might be able to match them anywhere close on the salary and the basic comp, and maybe some options and things like that as well. But when it came to, like, I suppose, am I getting access to a pension? Am I getting access to life insurance? Am I getting access to health insurance? I've got a family I got 2 kids. Like, this is kind of expected. They didn't have it. So he was starting to see the friction in the hiring process. Like, okay, well, people are asking about this thing. Why don't we have it? We're now 300 people. And when he went to HR, it just became such a big problem to solve at that stage, because if you do it for one country, or another country feels left out. So it just became a huge pain point for them to try and implement, and a costly one too, because the bigger you are, the more expensive it becomes as a problem. It becomes not just as the procurement process comes into place, but also the administration side too. So it's a huge, sometimes can be a large oversight, which doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
Yeah, indeed. And look, I mean, you've touched upon, I guess, a few different types of benefits, from health insurance to life insurance to pensions. Should we dive into each one of them and talk
Such
about
exciting
the pain
topic.
points? That's it. Well, somebody did say to me that they play the podcast to put their nephew to sleep. But I think these are pretty exciting topics, and I'm sure all the HR people listening will be very grateful for it.
Well, maybe we can make it a little bit more interesting. So we do. So what we offer right now is, so we offer health insurance in 30 countries. And bear in mind, we've only really started trading this year and started selling this year. And that's via Allianz, and that's like an IPMI, it's an international health insurance product. And then we offer pension in both the UK and Ireland, local master trusts that are locally compliant. And meet kind of the auto-enroll needs of those markets. We offer health insurance in those markets now as well, local health insurance with like local providers, and we're starting to offer life now as well. So they're the kind of products we offer, and I think where we sell right now is companies in the UK and Ireland. That's where we can be really, really competitive, because the product we're selling is awesome and the teams love it and it's all centralized. But it's where their home base is. It's usually where their core team is, and then we can serve the remote employees outside of that.
Excellent. And when it comes to, let's say, the local health insurance, I remember one of the pain points that we spoke about earlier this year, perhaps late last year, was the fact that if somebody had, let's say, a previous medical condition, it could be really hard for them to get insurance through their company. So do you want to dive into that type of pain point?
Yeah, it really depends on like the type of product you're enrolling yourselves in. It's like some products have, I suppose, like medical history disregarded. That's the beauty of like corporate group schemes, and we're going to get really deep into it. But like you've got retail schemes, which are like the end employee is risked, or the end user is risked, or the end customer is risked. And then sometimes they have group schemes where the group is risked. And depending on how I suppose the waiting periods work and how the claims work, a lot of the time that because you're in a group scheme means that you're taken to a fact there might be one or two people in that scheme that are immediately going to want to start claiming. So that's the beauty of it, and that's the luxury of it, and that's kind of the problem with, I suppose, smaller groups and I suppose individuals and contractors, that they don't have access to that type of kind of advantage as a group.
Yeah. Fantastic. And look, I'm really eager to sort of dive into the back end and some of the partnerships that you mentioned. But before we do that, how would a user sort of sign up on the platform and use the platform to access benefits?
Yeah, well, maybe what might be easiest for me to do is explain what it's like traditionally.
Yeah.
And what we do. Traditionally, you would probably go either one or two ways. You go to a broker. And that you'd say to the broker, we're looking for this type of product for our team in this country, and this is our kind of our needs. And they'll go do a work on the market, and they'll go say, okay, well, here's what we looked at. We've gotten prices for each, and a lot of time it can be a price thing where they come back. But ultimately, a lot of these brokers do have their own kind of fees on top.
Yes.
In some cases, particularly depends on the group size, and they have their commissions worked in as well. And they'll likely only do it in a local market. It's unless you're really, really big, we're going to have an international broker. They're not going to be able to expand that reach outside of that market. They might be able to introduce you to another broker. But that's kind of the experience you get. The reality is they're just going to introduce you to the product. They're going to get you set up on the product, and they'll be kind of I suppose, an intermediary between you and the provider, being the insurer or the pension provider. Sometimes a lot of different brokers have their own means and ways of doing this. That still means that your team are now carrying that administrative burden, the query burden, the financial reconciliation burden. And then obviously there's a cost involved in all of that too. And then one thing we don't really talk about enough, which is something that we kind of course what we do, is the user experience. So what does it actually look like for the employee to enroll? Are they being sent a PDF file to fill out and then send it back to a broker, or if they jump on a call with them, and which is just very unorthodox for a 30-something-year-old or someone even younger than that to do that when it comes to financial products. They're very, very used to engaging in financial products a very different way. So that's something we try to take to what we're doing here. The way we work is, if I bring it to the employer side, you can sign up on our website, or you can book a demo with our team. If you're happy to go ahead, of course, and we meet the needs of what you're looking for, we can onboard you really simply. You can connect your HR tool, like whether that be like your Workday, your Personio, your HiBob, your Humans, whatever that is. So now your HR tool is actually syncing with your benefits, which is something that doesn't really exist. So now that you've got, say, if a new employee starts, they're immediately put into your benefits package, and that's completely synced. Or someone's salary changes, that's now synced to your payroll provider. It basically removes all those emails and back and forth you usually do with a broker. So you connect your HR tool. Let's bring in your employees in. We'll create a package that suits you in that market. So we'll help you with things like benchmarking. So saying, what do you want to offer? Do you want to offer health? Do you want to offer life? Do you want to offer pension? Depending on the market, and some of these things are obviously mandatory too. And we'll create that with you with our customer success team. Once it's created and you've set your benchmarking, we've said, okay, well, this is the kind of area, this is the percentile of company I want to be. Well, you can settle that up once. And then it's just about adding the members. And the beauty is when you add the members, you're getting enrolled straight away. And that's the difference of what we do, is because we're not administering it under the hood. It's actually, we have a very few, I suppose, partners we work with on the provider side, which gives us access to be able to do things like real-time pricing, real-time enrollment, quoting obviously in real time, managing the money there and then. So it's not off platform, it's all in one place. So just kind of bring it back. So within Yonder, you'll connect your payment, your payment method. So that's probably direct debit. You'll connect your HRIS. So that's obviously your employee record. You'll create the package or what you want to offer to the team members. And you can just set up packages for new countries if you want to, willy-nilly. And then you enroll your team, and they get access to our mobile app From the administration side, that's basically all you have to do, and you just get your payroll reporting every month, which is localized and consolidated.
Yeah.
So that removes all that like finance pain. And then you have the employee app for the employee. So once an employee is added to the package, they get access to the app, they can enroll themselves, they can pick the plan they want. They're not constrained to one plan all of the time, depending on the market you're in and the dynamics of that market. But the likelihood is they get a budget that's allocated towards them, towards the product. So whether it's health insurance, you might be getting access to, in Ireland, for example, they might be getting €150 per month. They can see the plan will cover them the highest, and then they can pick from a section of plans, add their kids to the policy or add their spouse to the policy, enroll straight away and get covered. Pension, it means as well, you can enroll straight away and manage your pension there and then, and pause and start it. But yeah, it's that control and flexibility that usually you don't get.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And how much time do you estimate an employee saves getting their insurance and their pension through Yonder as opposed to a more traditional route?
It's weeks, yeah, absolutely. So like if you look at, well, firstly, by default it's weeks, because a lot of time you don't get enrolled until the next payroll period, the next cycle of when the enrollments go through and they're sent to an insurer. So sometimes it can be a lot longer. With us, it's instantly. So you get covered same day.
Yeah,
you're covered the same day, and it takes like our enrollment on the app, like, cause like do the demo so often it takes about a minute and a half.
Yeah, fantastic.
Which is pretty cool. And then if you look at the procurement side from the employer, like it's you're saving sometimes months.
Yes.
If you wanted to set up an entire group of 300 people and access these products, and we can do it for you same day. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. And I think one thing that you mentioned there about each employee having, let's say, a particular budget that they can spend on their benefits, from a finance point of view, it's really great in terms of, setting out cost capping and just aligning it to the unit economics as you scale.
Yeah, that's kind of the mission of the company is to increase access to these kind of inaccessible financial products.
Yeah.
And we speak to a lot of companies. It's similar to what I was mentioning earlier, where we've got these companies that may have just grown really quickly, and now they're at a place where like, oh my God, we can't actually add another 5-10% on top of payroll for benefits.
Yeah.
So it's about getting them on the ladder, getting them something that allows them to give the access to the employee. And by offering almost like a contribution, that is something that is now kind of that entry point, that introductory offer to the employee. An example of that is being able to say, okay, we can't cover a full price of a plan. Like we know a good plan is going to cost you, just for example, maybe €130. We can only do €50.
Yeah.
And that may not be huge, but it's something you can cap, and okay, well, like if everyone enrolled, is €50 per employee.
Yeah.
And then anything on top of that is the employee side. So that's the flexibility too, is like where the employer can give you a percentage or a certain cap amount, versus the employee being able to get whatever they want, and it comes out of their own payroll.
Yeah, fantastic.
If needs be.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and like you said, it does democratize access to those financial
100%.
products.
Yeah.
So, Luke, you've talked about the fact that you're able to issue policies instantly. You're able to set up pensions really quickly.
Yeah.
Are you able to talk us through these strategic partnerships that allow you to offer the platform?
Yeah, so if we look at the people we partner with today, so it's like Canada Life, Smart Pension in the UK, Vitality, Irish Life, and a few more, and Allianz as well, and a few more that we're announcing soon.
Yeah.
They're all pretty big names. They're all names that are usually the leader or the top 2 or 3.
Yes.
And that is strategic. It's completely down to, okay, well, we look at the market, we look at, are we hedging? Are we making sure that we're providing like regional coverage, not just local coverage into us? Like, so a lot of these insurers can be really good in like key cities, like London, for example. You might have insurers really good in London for whatever reason, just the way they've built their network up. That's not very useful to us, because by default we're working on a basis where you probably have employees who are remote. The types of companies we're selling to are remote, so we have to make sure we're serving kind of a national type of we're serving a national employer. And then also that we're working with a brand that's well known, so the employer knows it, and then also the coverage level is like exceptionally competitive to like the top 2 or 3 that's in the market. And then it's about kind of long-term goals of and the alignment we have with that initial insurer. Now, when we work with one, it's not like we work with them it's going to be the only one we work with forever. But the way our kind of strategy works is that we definitely want to go wider before we go deeper. Like as I said, companies we work with tend to be in multiple markets, so they want to see us have access to products in not just the UK, but also in like Portugal and Spain and Netherlands and India and Canada. And our goal of the next few years is to make sure we get them coverage in those markets from really good providers.
Yes.
And when we have that and we start to see what the demand looks like, we can start going deeper in those markets and offering more optionality.
Yeah.
But right now, I think the key thing is just making sure that we can provide coverage to the companies we work with. That's the biggest question we get asked about.
Yeah, fantastic. And so, and I suppose two questions. The first one is going to be about the consumer. So, if I were to, use Yonder because my employer offered me benefits through Yonder, would I be able to choose from multiple different insurance providers?
Not just yet. So it's one provider, and that's usually probably going to always be the case. The reality is when you create a group scheme, it's always going to be one provider.
Got you.
It's kind of mandated by the company that, okay, well, look, we'll give you this amount, but it's going to be with this provider, and that's who we've chosen.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as that. But you'll see different plans. So you can see, okay, the plan that you're probably the highest level of coverage is going to be against versus all the other plans you can go for and contribute above the subsidy.
Yes.
And then if you want to give a spouse or a kid or your spouse or your dependent to you want to add to the policy, that's also kind of available there too.
Fantastic. And so my second question there was going to be about the technical side. So how do you make sure that you're receiving, let's say, these quotes and prices and issuing policies in real time?
It's by getting the kind of API access or whatever access we can get.
Yeah.
To match the member, the age, the location, all the different things that are required for that quote.
Yeah.
In some markets, it's not as simple as just age and location. It's everything from when was their last insurance take up, how long was it before, what was the gap of insurance. That all is carried into the weight of the quote, which we've all had to build into our product. And getting access to their quoting engine, really, a lot of the time. It's actually getting access to their real-time quoting engine. Which is pain in the hole sometimes, but it's required.
Yeah,
if you want it, because it's such a key part of our experience.
Indeed, indeed, fantastic. Look, and I mean, I think, like issuing insurance in real time, it's groundbreaking.
It's in health it is. Other products it's not. Like general insurance, it can be quite straightforward because you know what the parameters are.
Yes.
The parameters in health are so different because there's obviously all these different plans, and then it's as you're taking into account humans and all the different, I suppose, variables that come with that.
Yeah.
And obviously how different insurers are quoting.
Yes.
So we have to figure that. We have to build that into our system too.
Yeah. Fantastic. You mentioned as well that you're working with pension providers. So are you able to elaborate a little bit about the technical background with those providers?
Yeah, like I think every provider we work with has a completely different integration. You've got providers who are very technical, and you have providers who aren't technical. We've worked with both. Like an example of that would be like in the UK, we work with Smart Pension, which is obviously in the name, they're smart. Like they're fantastic, and they've got great documentation, and they've got great APIs, and you're working to their format.
Yes.
And then you've got others who aren't, and you just have to kind of, thankfully that we've done this a few times now, we've built an idea of what is good and what isn't so good, and how we work with, I suppose, providers who don't have much when it comes to any sort of technical. It's just reconciliation and moving around money and billing and kind of capturing what we can when it comes to the members.
Yeah,
that's a very different. But the reality is it the ideal experience we always want to provide? No. Is it better than what's in the market, and is it like more than acceptable? Does the employee always know? Yeah, I think that we that's our goal, is always to make sure that the employee's experience is 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
it exceeds what they have. And I'm almost jealous of the employees who've never had to experience what the older version of what the world looked like before Yonder.
Yeah,
because they're seeing what we have, and they're like, okay, well, it's just basics. That's what they expect, and it's not.
yeah, fantastic. Look, you also dived into the fact that you want to go wider. And you mentioned international expansion. Do you have plans to expand into more markets beyond the UK and Ireland? Yeah,
so we already are in 30 countries. So we have a health insurance product in 30 countries. It's about basically being locally more competitive in more markets.
Yeah.
So when can we serve bigger teams in those markets? Because if you're a 30-person company, more than 30 people, you're expecting to have a local brand name, and like the product we offer can be expensive in some markets and cheaper than others. And we need to make sure that where we're expensive in some markets, we need to be reducing the premium, so it's a more competitive product locally.
Okay.
So the markets we're looking at the moment are kind of a lot of the Central European ones.
Yeah.
The ones where you can think of as talent hubs, like the Netherlands, Portugal,
Yeah.
Spain, Germany, like France. Those are markets that we're switching on at the moment. And then even like India, UAE and Canada, they're markets
Wow.
we're looking at as well. So
Yeah.
all in kind of all in 2024.
Fantastic. And so you've discussed the fact that international expansion is, something that you're looking to do or something that you're actively doing. But when it comes to the product roadmap, what are your plans for 2023? Though we've only got a couple of months left now. Let's say, what are your plans for 2024?
Yeah, I think the key thing is making sure we're as seamless as possible for the employer.
Mm-hmm.
So removing all the parts of friction that were previously there.
Yeah.
So we mentioned a little bit around like what we're doing with HR tools, like becoming far more automated around HR tools.
Yeah.
The same thing will go for payroll tools and finance tools, making sure that we kind of become end to end, and isn't like finance and HR don't need to be thinking about benefits as much.
Yeah.
They can just think about offering, I suppose, great experiences to employees.
Mm.
And then the employee side, we have loads of things you want to do on the employee apps, like more controls, access to other benefits outside of their core ones. Maybe we're not doing them, but we're giving the companies the ability to do that. It's about maybe even more products, so outside of health, pension, life. There's other kind of micro insurance products we're looking at. And then we have an API as well. So it's providing our API to other providers, other platforms, developers essentially who can leverage it in different ways, in different use cases that we've not really thought about doing ourselves.
Yeah, so B2B to B strategy.
Yeah, HR tools, basically, HR platforms who are already falling into the trap of either administering these products without wanting to administer them, or there's platforms that want to get into it but haven't been able to.
Yeah, fantastic. We met at the beginning of 2022, and it was prior to the war in Ukraine starting. By the time you launched in 2022, interest rates were rising, funding was really being clawed back, but you've raised a couple of rounds since then, including one very recently. So how was that experience?
Yeah, like I think we raised our pre-seed with North Zone and Frontline and Kota. It was January 22, so that's when we actually closed around, like January, February 22.
Yeah.
And then we were very much in building mode for most of 22 as well, doing our first integrations, had some very, very early beta customers. We didn't actually start onboarding customers outside our network until this year, until 23. At which point we very quickly saw we've got what I would call kind of problem solution fit, where we knew we were solving something that was big and that was needed. And then we started to see all the other use cases. So we started to see, okay, the infrastructure here is pretty valuable to other people.
Yeah.
The API is quite useful to other people too. And we just thought, okay, there's an ability to ramp up. And we weren't actually even trying to raise. I think it was something that in a luxury position where you see there was interest and you saw that there were plenty of partners who you'd spoken to over the period who kind of saw the journey from that kind of initial funding round to beta customers, to the milestones we hit, to what the customers are saying and what the market was saying, to where we wanted to go in the vision. We wanted to jump on board and made that process. That wasn't easy, but it was definitely one that was a lot more attainable than I would say if you weren't in that position, if you were kind of clamoring for like problem solution fit, if you want to say it. We knew we had something, and with revenue as well, and that was helpful too. So so we raised 5 million from EQT Ventures earlier this year, and that whole purpose of that is obviously to give us runway to go and execute, but also go after a very, very, very big problem, which is really around the infrastructure in this market and building something that doesn't exist, which is always it's always what you want to do, because you're kind of there's no playbook, and then also hiring the best people to do that, and over the next kind of 2, 3, 4 years, just making sure that we can get into as many markets as possible, because that was the key thing, is just like making sure that we've got coverage. Coverage is what is the most important thing for us. Yeah, indeed. Fantastic. And are you able to dive into, let's say, your go-to-market strategy and how you gain that traction that unlocked the funding? Yeah, like if I'm honest, like we're now 19 people, which feels like a lot of people early. But we just hired our first go-to-market person, our first person who's actually selling to customers. Everything to date has been, it's been through two channels. It's been through SEO and through some partnerships.
Okay. Nice.
So it's kind of about being BFAN. It's kind of like the whole BFAN strategy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've been at that luxury where a lot of it's been inbound, but now we want to start generating our own demand. And those were beta customers, those were early stage customers, and also I really wish I hired someone earlier because it took so long to find that right person to go and be that kind of first GTM lead, first head of sales. And now we're at a point where we need to start ramping up and building out that team a bit more. But thankfully, like the signs are great. It's just like first early doors, starting to do our first bits of outbound, and the reaction has been really, really solid. So positively looking at like we're hiring more in that area this year. So yeah, the three areas that we focus on are SEO, partnerships, outbound, and just using our network as well as like when you're a startup and you're really, really early doors. It's like using your friends, using your network of founders that you can leverage.
Excellent.
The ecosystems you're in, essentially.
And SEO is an interesting one because, you know, it's like very, very popular with, let's say, you know, D2C companies. But, you know, primarily you are a B2B company. So how have you found SEO as a channel?
Well, I think it's not that, like, I'm not saying I'm an SEO expert. We got people who are much better than me at it, but it was a strategy that was based on the fact of like, where are our customer? Where is our customer? Where are they looking? How are they looking for it? And the reality is they're either in the tools that they use their HR and finance all day. So their payroll tools, their accounting tools, their expense management tools, or more importantly, like their HRIS tools. That's a key one for us, making sure that we're found there. And then they're either searching for queries or trying to find out things about like what is the health insurance I need to offer my team in France, or is there a auto enroll pension in Ireland if I'm hiring my first person in Ireland, or I'm opening an entity in Ireland. And making sure that you're you're visible there is incredibly important for us. So it's something takes it's a long-term investment. Like where we are now is not where we were 6 months ago, and where we're going to be 6 months from now is going to be a very different dimension to where we were. But we've seen the kind of results of that pay off. Like a lot of the customers we speak to, like where are they finding us? They're finding us from Google. They're finding us from LinkedIn. They're finding us because they saw us on like within one of our partners' ecosystems.
Nice.
And it's been less about creating our own demand in a market that is very cyclical too.
Fantastic. And when it comes to some of those partnerships that you mentioned, do you want to dig into any of them?
So like I'm not sure how much you want me to give away, but a lot of it has just been down to, I suppose, the friends in our industry. So like, okay, who can we like resonate a little bit more with? Is it the people who are on the same trajectory as us, building digital tools that we can align with? And you can think of the HR tools we're looking about, like obviously like Humans, Personio, they're the ones that we're working with. Is it banking products where like they have also kind of a very similar ICP in a very similar market, similar type of customer, like they're the ones we integrate with, or sorry, we work with, like Revolut Business. So it's basically, and we have not delved too much into the partnership side of things as much as we want to, because we've just been like, as I mentioned, like we're the first GTM person we hired was only a few weeks ago. So a lot of that has just been kind of done internally through myself. So now it's about kind of doubling down on that. So it's really interesting to see what we do when we actually ramp up those partnerships.
Fantastic. Luke, you know, you've done a fantastic job with Kota. At the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned that you previously founded another business, and you know, I guess made reference to, you know, the exit at the end not, you know, going, let's say, as smoothly as, you know, one may have hoped. But can you tell us about, you know, the journey of, let's say, a founder or, you know, a multiple time entrepreneur?
I think you've got to be a very particular and different individual to really like doing this. I think if you meet the more successful founders you meet, the weirder they are. I think you've probably seen that. So I think it's a lifestyle that not everyone, particularly, it depends on the type of business you're building, but if you're building a venture-backed business where the pressure is high and the ambition is large, you have to move in a certain way. And that means you make a lot of sacrifices, and you have to be very, very disciplined.
So, you know, there's different types of pressures that founders face. And, you know, operators, certainly when I was an operator, there was a lot of things that I didn't realize, you know, founders had to sort of take control of and deal with. What would you say the worst three things are
of as a
being
founder?
Yeah.
I think really early you learn to handle the highs and the lows. Because if you get too caught up in the highs and the lows, it can be quite damaging emotionally. Like there's going to be really, really bad days, months. Like I remember my first company, like every payroll was about survival. Like every single payroll was about like scrambling together as much money as you possibly can to meet payroll. And I remember myself and my now co-founder in this new company just sitting in our little room, a little kind of meeting room in our office, and just kind of sitting across from each other at the table, looking at the bank balance and saying, all right, how much can you take home? And like, what do you need this month? I can live on, like, I can get through on this many hundred. What can you do? What's rent looking like? Like, that's the sacrifice. And we were doing that for like 10 to 12 months straight. And then there's like you're obviously going through different, like everything has different scenarios, but the barrage of whether you're trying to manage like just keeping customers online, trying to grow customers at the same time. So there's very different periods you go through as a founder as well. You can be on the defense, which that during those times definitely felt like it, or you can be on the absolute offense. And it's about managing the upside, like how you're doing this while you grow, and how you do this while you pour fuel on the fire. How do you do this without everything falling apart? That's a key thing. It's like making sure that you understand what scaling looks like. Two very different problems, like not dying, like there's surviving and not dying, and there's like thriving. And they all come with their own difficulties. So I think one thing is, definitely don't like drink the Kool-Aid when it comes to the highs, and be wary that everyone has their lows, and it's just part of the game. So that's one thing. I think hiring is a key one. Like when you learn what good looks like, you know what really, really good looks like, and you're not insecure about hiring people that are just like significantly better than you. That's a very good place to be. And you realize that everyone's there on the same mission, and because they believe in you, and they believe in the mission of the company, what you're building, and the product. It's a beautiful place, because now you just got everyone on the same page and all running in the same direction. The culture is intact. And it's about you just kind of finessing the culture and the standards to make sure that everyone is still, I suppose, it's still kind of steering the ship at the same time altogether. Because you are now going to become, like, as the team grows, you are going to be multiple people away from the execution of everything that's going on in the business. In the early days, you are executing it, and you have a certain standard, and sometimes you can touch the things and keep the standard there, and be a bearer of that. And then over time, you're passing that on to other people, and they know when you're not in the room what you would say if you weren't here, or what their manager would say if you weren't here. So it's making sure that is done, and that is really done through hiring a really good culture of that. So I would say being very good at hiring, good at being able to manage your I suppose maybe on standard manage your emotions. And then what's the third thing I would probably say? I think investors. If you're a venture-backed company, it's like very clearly understanding who you're putting on your cap table. It's just as important as hiring, obviously, but actually sometimes it can be even it's actually more important hiring, because you can't fire investors. You have to be very clear, like, okay, what does this person add to the company? Are they a value-add investor? Are they just money? Sometimes they both are fine, but like you obviously want to be very careful of how you manage that relationship and what their expectations are. But I think that's like it's now more than ever. If I look at our cap table, every single person on that cap table, I'm not saying they're there for a reason. Whether they add value to the founding team or the people we hire, or they're someone that is able to open a door for us, and they all know that too. They all know, like, investors are going to be competitive. It is a competitive sport. You're trying to get on the cap table of certain companies. You need to be able to prove your worth sometimes, and sometimes people are even pitching themselves like, I'd love to come in, I'd love to help with this. And that's super valuable when you have that. You don't want to have people who feel like they're doing you a favor either.
Indeed. Fantastic. And look, Luke, I think that was also a really good I guess piece of advice for people that maybe are considering becoming a founder. But just to wrap up, you've done a lot of different things in your career. You've scaled a couple of businesses. Kota is really scaling fast now. personally, what key takeaways would you provide to the audience?
They are very similar to what I just mentioned.
Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, we can refer back to those, but I mean, if there's anything that you didn't mention then that you want to close off with.
I think for founders, there's three things that I would always say. It's like, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's going to be uncomfortable for a very long period of time. So learn to embrace it and learn to understand that when things are shit, it's fine. It's like that's it. The other one is startups are chaos. So don't think too deeply into like whether things are going poorly or not. Yeah. Like everyone has their own shit. Like everyone, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, 100%.
Like it's like you speak to any founder, and I think the best conversations you have with founders are when you ask them like how are things going, and they actually tell you the truth. Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, it's great, yeah, it's all good. Like the reality is, we all have our stuff. We all have our things that are going well, whether it's people problems or fundraising or customer trying to find product market fit. Yeah, it's a very real thing. So just being able to recognize that. And then I would say the other thing is I think it's just standard setting. It's you in the early days, if you don't standard set and if you're not on top of things, that's where the ship just kind of falls apart. And you can correct that for a certain period of time, but if it goes too deep, it's very hard to recover that. And people leave, morale gets shit. And you have to be very I think you just have to be very aware of any of them kind of micro issues you see in the business around that, and around how people deal with people, how you're putting product out in the world, what people's idea of great is. Yes, is a really important thing. What people's idea of good is another important thing. Sometimes good is okay, is acceptable and for certain things you ship, but the reality is like there's certain things they just whether it's particularly if it's touching a customer, that's when you have to obviously just understand where your bar is. Yeah, indeed. Fantastic. Look, Luke, thank you so much for telling us about Kota and your background today, and congratulations on the funding round. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Lucas. You're most welcome. Thank you, Luke.